Have you ever wondered what it feels like when your entire world changes in a single heartbeat? When one stolen glance across a crowded room makes time stand still, Emma thought she knew everything about love until she met Julian at that charity gala. One accidental touch, one whispered word, one forbidden kiss, and her ordinary life became an extraordinary fairy tale. What would you do if love found you when you least expected it? Emma Rodriguez adjusted her simple black dress for the 100th time as she stood at the entrance of the Grand Metropole Hotel. The charity gala glittered before her like a scene from a movie, with crystal chandeliers casting rainbow lights across marble floors and elegant guests in designer gowns mingling with champagne glasses. She felt completely out of place among the wealthy elite who moved through the ballroom like graceful swans on a pristine lake. A T-24. Emma worked as a junior event coordinator for a small nonprofit organization. Tonight was her first major event, and she was here purely for work, not pleasure. Her boss had sent her to oversee the charity auction arrangements, but now she wondered if she should have stayed home with her books and tea instead of venturing into this intimidating world of luxury and power. She clutched her clipboard tighter and made her way through the crowd, trying to blend into the shadows while checking on the auction display tables. The cause was close to her heart, raising funds for underprivileged children's education, but she felt like an imposter among these people who probably spent more on their shoes than she made in a month. Julian Blackstone stood across the room, his presence commanding attention even in a sea of influential figures. At 32, he was the youngest billionaire in the city, having built his tech empire from nothing after losing his parents in a car accident when he was 18. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his emerald eyes held depths of intelligence and pain that few people ever glimpsed beneath his composed exterior. He wore success like a second skin, his tailored black tuxedo fitting him perfectly as he moved with the confidence of a man who owned the world. Yet tonight, surrounded by his usual circle of business associates and society elite, Julian felt an emptiness that all his wealth couldn't fill. He had everything money could buy, but nothing that truly mattered. The auction was about to begin when disaster struck. Emma was adjusting the microphone at the podium when her heel caught in her dress hem. She stumbled forward, her clipboard and papers flying everywhere as she crashed directly into the solid chest of someone behind her. Strong arms caught her before she could hit the ground, and she looked up into the most mesmerizing green eyes she had ever seen. Time seemed to freeze as they stared at each other, her hands pressed against his chest, his arms wrapped protectively around her waist. "I'm so sorry," Emma whispered, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. "I'm such a klutz." Julian found himself unable to speak for a moment, captivated by her natural beauty. She wasn't wearing the heavy makeup and designer clothes of the other women here. Her long chestnut hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and her warm brown eyes sparkled with intelligence and kindness. There was something refreshingly genuine about her that drew him in like a magnet. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his deep voice sending shivers down my spine like music I had never heard before. "No, I'm fine, thanks to you," I replied, suddenly aware that we were still in each other's arms, and that people were starting to stare. "I should probably let you get back to your evening. I'm sure you have important people to talk to." "Actually," Julian said, reluctant to let me go, "I was just thinking how boring this party was until now. You're the first real person I've met all evening." I felt my heart skip a beat at his words. This incredibly handsome man, who clearly belonged in this world of wealth and sophistication, was looking at me like I was the most fascinating person in the room, instead of just the clumsy event coordinator who had nearly knocked him over. "I'm Emma," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Julian," he replied, finally releasing me, but staying close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne. "And I have to say, Emma, you have the most beautiful smile I've ever seen." Before I could respond, the auctioneer called for everyone's attention. I realized I needed to get back to work, but Julian gently took my arm with a touch that sent electricity through my entire body. "Would you like to sit with me during the auction?" he asked. "I promise to bid generously if you'll keep me company." I knew I should decline and focus on my job, But something about this mysterious stranger made me want to throw caution to the wind for once in my carefully planned life. "I'd like that," I heard myself saying. We found seats at a table near the front, and I watched in amazement as Julian bid on item after item, raising hundreds of thousands of dollars for causes I care deeply about. But more than his generosity, I was captivated by our easy conversation. He listened to me talk about my work with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions about the children we helped and the programs we funded. "You really care about this cause," Julian observed, as the auction continued around us. "These kids deserve every opportunity to succeed," I replied passionately. "Education can change everything for them, just like it did for me. I grew up in foster care, moving from home to home, and my teachers were the only people who consistently believed in me when everyone else saw just another throwaway kid." Julian felt something stir deep in his chest at her words. Here was someone who understood struggle, who had risen above difficult circumstances through sheer determination and hard work. She wasn't interested in his money or status. She was driven by something much more meaningful than material success. "What about you?" I asked. "What made you want to support this cause tonight?" Julian was quiet for a moment, unused to sharing personal information with anyone, especially someone he had just met. But something about Emma made him want to open up in a way he hadn't in years. "I started my first company because I wanted to prove that where you come from doesn't determine where you end up. These kids remind me that success isn't just about making money, it's about making a real difference in the world." The auction ended with record-breaking donations, largely thanks to Julian's incredibly generous bidding. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, I realized I didn't want this magical night to end. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. "Thank you for making tonight special," I said as we walked toward the exit together. "I've never experienced anything like this before. This whole evening feels like a dream." Julian stopped walking and turned to face me, his expression serious and intense. "Emma, I know we just met, but I haven't felt this connected to anyone in years. Would you have dinner with me tomorrow night? I'd love to get to know you better." My heart raced like a hummingbird's wings. This felt like a fairy tale, too good to be true. But the sincerity in his green eyes made me believe in magic again. "I'd love to," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We stood under the hotel's grand entrance, the city lights twinkling around us like fallen stars. Julian reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his touch sending electric currents through my entire body that I had never experienced before. "Until tomorrow, Emma," he said softly, leaning down to press the gentlest kiss to my cheek. As I watched him walk away to his waiting limousine, I touched my cheek where his lips had been, knowing with absolute certainty that my ordinary life had just become an extraordinary love story. Hearts in collision. Next evening, I stood in front of my tiny apartment's bathroom mirror, trying on the third dress in my extremely limited wardrobe. Nothing seemed elegant enough for dinner with Julian Blackstone, but I reminded myself that he had seemed genuinely interested in who I was as a person, not what designer labels I could or couldn't afford. I had spent the entire day at work, unable to concentrate on anything, replaying every moment of our encounter like a favorite song on repeat. My coworkers had noticed my distracted state and dreamy expression, but I kept the details to myself, afraid that saying it out loud might make the magic disappear like morning mist. At exactly 7 o'clock, there was a soft knock on my apartment door. I opened it to find Julian standing there with a single white rose, looking devastatingly handsome in a navy blue suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean, athletic frame. "You look absolutely stunning," he said, his eyes traveling appreciatively over my simple emerald green dress that I had bought for a friend's wedding last year. "Thank you," I replied, accepting the rose with a shy smile. "You clean up pretty well yourself, though I suspect you always look this good." Julian had chosen a small, intimate restaurant tucked away from the city's main streets. It was the kind of place where privacy was valued over publicity, and I immediately felt more comfortable than I would have at some flashy, expensive establishment where everyone would stare at us. Over dinner, our conversation flowed as naturally as wine from a perfectly aged bottle. I found myself laughing at Julian's dry humor and sharing stories I rarely told anyone, even my closest friends. He was nothing like I had expected a billionaire to be. He was down to earth, genuinely curious about my life and experiences, and surprisingly vulnerable when he talked about his own journey. "Tell me about your business," I said, as we shared a rich chocolate dessert. "What drives you to work as hard as you do?" Julian leaned back in his chair, his expression growing thoughtful and distant. "After my parents died in that car accident, I had nothing and no one. I was 18, about to start college, and suddenly, I was completely alone in the world. I could have given up, felt sorry for myself, but instead I used that pain as fuel. Every success, every business achievement has been my way of honoring their memory and proving that their sacrifices weren't in vain." I reached across the table and placed my hand over his, feeling the warmth and strength beneath his skin. "They would be so incredibly proud of you and everything you've accomplished." The simple, sincere touch sent warmth spreading through Julian's chest like sunrise after the longest night. He had built walls around his heart for so long that he had forgotten what genuine human connection felt like. Emma's compassion and natural strength reminded him of everything good and pure in the world. "What about you?" Julian asked, turning his hand palm up to intertwine our fingers. "What are your biggest dreams?" "I want to open my own educational center someday," I admitted, my voice growing passionate. "A place where kids from difficult backgrounds can get tutoring, mentorship, and emotional support. I know what it's like to feel invisible and unwanted, and I want to make sure no child ever feels that way again." Julian was quiet for a long moment, studying my face in the candlelight, memorizing every detail. "How much would it cost to start something like that?" I laughed softly, but there was sadness in it. "More than I could ever afford, even if I saved every penny for the next 20 years. I've been putting money aside for 3 years, and I'm nowhere close to having enough for a down payment on a building, let alone equipment and staff salaries." "What if you didn't have to worry about the money?" he asked quietly. My eyes widened in surprise. "Julian, I couldn't possibly let you pay for something like that. It wouldn't be right." "Why not?" he asked gently. "I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. What's the point of having it if I can't use it to help someone achieve something truly meaningful?" "Because I need to earn it myself," I said firmly, a voice filled with quiet determination. "That's the only way it will really belong to me and mean something real." Julian found himself falling even deeper for this remarkable woman who refused to take the easy path. Her integrity and fierce independence were more attractive to him than any physical beauty could ever be. She wasn't trying to use him or take advantage of his wealth. She genuinely wanted to build something with her own hands and heart. After dinner, we walked through the city park, talking under the starlit sky about everything and nothing. Julian had never felt so relaxed, so genuinely himself with another person. Emma made him forget about board meetings and profit margins and stock prices. With her, he was just a man enjoying the company of an extraordinary woman who saw him for who he really was. "I should probably head home," I said reluctantly, as we reached an ornate fountain in the center of the park. "I have an early meeting tomorrow with some potential donors." Julian didn't want the evening to end, but he respected my dedication to my work and responsibilities. "Can I see you again soon?" "I'd like that very much," I replied, my heart fluttering at the hope and longing I heard in his voice. We stood facing each other by the fountain, the sound of cascading water creating a romantic backdrop. Julian reached up and cupped my face gently in his strong hands, his thumbs stroking my cheeks with infinite tenderness. "Emma," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I know this might sound completely crazy since we've only known each other for 2 days, but I think I'm falling in love with you." Before I could find words to respond, he leaned down and kissed me softly, pouring all of his longing and hope into that single, perfect moment. I felt my world tilt on its axis as I kissed him back, feeling like I was finally exactly where I belonged after years of searching for home. When we broke apart, both of us were breathing heavily, our foreheads touching as we held each other close. "It doesn't sound crazy at all," I whispered against his lips, "because I think I'm falling in love with you too." and it terrifies and thrills me at the same time. Over the next few weeks, Julian and I were practically inseparable. He showed me his world of luxury and privilege, but what amazed me most was his genuine generosity and sincere desire to use his wealth and influence for good. I showed Julian what it meant to find joy in simple pleasures, teaching him to appreciate quiet moments and authentic connections over expensive possessions and superficial relationships. Our relationship wasn't without its challenges. The media discovered our romance and began following me everywhere, printing stories about the billionaire's mystery woman and Cinderella's modern fairy tale. Some articles were kind and romantic, but others were cruel and invasive, questioning my motives and suggesting I was nothing more than a gold digger who had seduced a lonely rich man. "Don't read that garbage," Julian said one morning, finding me upset and crying over a particularly nasty tabloid article that had somehow gotten photos of us kissing in the park. "The people writing those stories don't know you, and they don't know us or what we have together. But what if people think it's true?" I worried, my voice shaking. "What if your business associates and friends think I'm just some opportunistic nobody who's using you?" Julian pulled me into his strong arms, holding me tight against his chest. "The only opinion that matters to me is yours. Do you love me for who I am as a person, not what I have in my bank account?" "Of course I do," I said, without a moment's hesitation. "I'd love you if you were broke and living in a cardboard box. Then nothing else matters," Julian replied firmly, kissing the top of my head. "I love you, Emma Rodriguez, and I'm not going to let anyone make us feel ashamed of something so beautiful and real." Despite the media attention and occasional disapproving looks from some members of Julian's social circle, our love only grew stronger and deeper with each passing day. I continued working at Hope Foundation, and Julian found himself increasingly involved in charitable causes and community outreach. Inspired by my passion for helping others and making a real difference, 3 months after our first magical meeting, Julian surprised me with a weekend trip to his family's lake house upstate. It was a beautiful, peaceful retreat, surrounded by mountains and pine trees, far from the chaos and noise of city life. "This place is absolutely incredible," I said as we sat on the wooden dock watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of pink and gold. "My parents bought this when I was 10 years old," Julian said quietly, his voice filled with bittersweet memories. "We came here every summer until they died. It's the only place where I still feel truly close to them." I understood the profound significance of him bringing me here. This wasn't just a romantic weekend getaway. This was Julian sharing the most sacred and private part of his past with me, trusting me with his deepest emotions and most precious memories. That night, as we sat by the crackling fireplace with mugs of hot chocolate, Julian took my hands in his and looked directly into my eyes. "Emma, these past few months have been the happiest and most meaningful of my entire life," he began, his voice serious and filled with emotion. "You've shown me what it means to truly live and love, not just exist from day to day. You've made me want to be a better man, not just for you, but for everyone whose life I touch." I started to speak, but he gently pressed a finger to my lips with a loving smile. "Let me finish what I need to say," he said softly. "I know we haven't been together very long by conventional standards, but I can't imagine my future without you in it. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want to build a real life with you, have children with you, grow old and gray with you by my side." Julian dropped to one knee right there in front of the fireplace and pulled out a small velvet box that seemed to glow in the firelight. Inside was the most beautiful ring I had ever seen, a classic solitaire diamond that caught the flames and threw rainbows across the rustic room. "Emma Rodriguez, you are the love of my life and my soulmate. Will you marry me and make me the happiest man alive?" I stared at the ring, then at Julian's hopeful, vulnerable face, my heart overflowing with more love and joy than I had ever thought possible. Tears of pure happiness streamed down my cheeks as I whispered, "Yes, oh my God, yes. Of course, I'll marry you." Julian slipped the perfect ring onto my finger, then stood up and spun me around the cozy room, both of us laughing and crying with overwhelming happiness and the promise of our beautiful future together. Forever begins. The engagement brought new challenges, along with our overwhelming joy and excitement. Julian wanted to give me the wedding of my dreams, complete with hundreds of guests and every luxury imaginable. But I preferred something simple, intimate, and meaningful over flashy and expensive. We compromised on an elegant but personal ceremony at the lake house where he had proposed, with only our closest friends and the people who truly mattered to us in attendance. The setting was naturally beautiful, requiring minimal decoration, beyond white roses and twinkling fairy lights strung through the pine trees. My foster mother, Mrs. Patterson, was the closest thing to real family I had, and she cried tears of pure joy when she met Julian and saw how much we loved each other. "He looks at you like you hung the moon and stars," she whispered to me during our wedding planning. "That's how you know it's the real thing, sweetheart." Julian's business partner and closest friend, David Chen, was initially skeptical about our engagement, worried that marriage and love might distract Julian from their company and ambitious business goals. But after spending time with both of us together, he became one of our biggest supporters and advocates. "She makes you human again," David told Julian one evening after dinner at our apartment. "I was starting to worry you were turning into some kind of workaholic robot who only cared about profit margins." The wedding day dawned clear and absolutely beautiful, with golden sunlight filtering through the trees and a gentle breeze rippling across the lake's surface. I wore a simple but elegant white dress that made me feel like a princess from a fairy tale, while Julian couldn't stop smiling as he waited for me at the altar we had set up overlooking the water. As I walked down the petal-strewn aisle with Mrs. Patterson by my side, Julian felt his breath catch in his throat. I was so beautiful, so radiant with happiness and love, that he could barely believe I was about to become his wife and partner for life. "You may now kiss the bride," the minister announced, after we had exchanged heartfelt, personal vows that left both of us and most of our guests in tears. Julian cupped my face in his hands and kissed me with all the love in his heart, deep and passionate and full of promise. "Just one kiss," he whispered against my lips, echoing the words that had become our private joke and special phrase. "And you stole my heart completely." "Then we're perfectly even," I whispered back. "Because you gave me yours in return, and I'm never giving it back." Our honeymoon was spent traveling through Europe, exploring ancient cities and creating memories that would last our entire lifetime. I had never been outside the United States before, and Julian took pure joy in showing me the world through fresh, wondering eyes. "I can't believe this is actually my life now," I said one evening as we sat at a sidewalk cafe in Paris, watching the sunset behind the Eiffel Tower while sharing a bottle of wine. "It's our life," Julian corrected gently, taking my hand and kissing my wedding ring. "Everything I have, everything I am, is yours now and forever." "I don't mean the material things and fancy places," I clarified. "I mean this feeling of being completely and unconditionally loved and cherished." Growing up bouncing between foster homes, I used to dream about finding someone who would love me the way you do. And I used to think that kind of deep, soul-connecting love only existed in fairy tales and romance novels, Julian replied. "You proved me beautifully wrong." When we returned from our magical honeymoon, we settled into married life, with surprising ease and natural rhythm. I moved into Julian's penthouse apartment, though I insisted on keeping some of my simple, meaningful furniture, because it makes this fancy place feel more like a real home. Julian discovered that having me share his space transformed everything about his daily life. I filled the sterile, modern apartment with warmth and personality, bringing in plants and family photos, and the wonderful smell of home-cooked meals. For the first time in years since his parents died, Julian actually looked forward to coming home from work each day. I continued working at Hope Foundation, though Julian's connections and influence helped me secure larger donations and grants for our programs. I was making real, measurable progress toward my dream of opening my own educational center, and Julian supported my goals completely without trying to take over or rush the process. 1 year after our perfect wedding had wonderful, life-changing news to share with my husband. I planned a special dinner to tell Julian, cooking his favorite meal, and setting our dining room table with candles, flowers, and all the romance I could muster. "What's the special occasion?" Julian asked when he came home from work to find our dining room transformed into something magical. "Just celebrating us and our love," I said mysteriously, handing him a small, carefully wrapped box with a mischievous smile. Inside the box was a tiny pair of baby shoes in soft yellow, along with a note that read, "Coming soon, baby Blackstone, arriving in 7 months." Julian stared at the impossibly small shoes for a long moment, then looked at me with wonder, shock, and pure joy shining in his beautiful green eyes. "Are you telling me exactly what I think you're telling me?" I nodded, tears of happiness streaming down my face as I placed his hand on my still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby, Julian. We're going to be parents." Julian picked me up carefully and spun me around our kitchen, both of us laughing and crying at the same time with overwhelming emotion. "I love you so much," he said, setting me down gently and kneeling to kiss my stomach. "I can't believe we created a life together." 9 months later, our daughter Sophia Grace was born, a perfect, healthy baby who was clearly a beautiful blend of both her parents. With Julian's striking green eyes and my warm, gentle smile. Watching Julian hold his daughter for the first time, I fell in love with him all over again, in a completely new and deeper way. "She's absolutely perfect," Julian whispered, tears streaming down his face as he cradled our tiny daughter. "Just like her incredible mother. She has your eyes," I said softly, stroking the baby's impossibly soft cheek. "And hopefully your determination and strength. And your kind, loving heart," Julian added, kissing our daughter's tiny forehead with infinite tenderness. "She's going to change the world someday." 2 years later, we welcomed twin boys, Gabriel James and Noah William. Our penthouse was completely transformed into a warm, chaotic family home filled with laughter, toys, children's books, and the beautiful, exhausting, wonderful reality of raising 3 small children who were the center of our universe. I finally opened my educational center, naming it Second Chances Learning Academy, to honor my own difficult journey and the journey of every child who needed someone to believe in them. Julian provided the initial funding as my partner and investor, but I ran the program entirely on my own, building it into a model that other cities began to study and replicate. "Are you truly happy?" Julian asked one evening as we sat on our balcony, watching our 3 children play together in the living room while the sun set over the city we both loved. "Happier than I ever dreamed was possible," I replied with complete honesty. "Even when the twins are both screaming at 3 in the morning, and Sophia is going through a phase where she won't eat anything green?" Julian laughed, pulling me closer to his side. "Even then?" "Especially then," I said. "Because I'm facing all of it with the love of my life, my best friend, and the most amazing father these kids could ever have." Now, 5 years after that first magical, life-changing night at the charity gala, Julian and my love story continues to unfold and grow more beautiful with each passing day. Julian has stepped back significantly from his business responsibilities to spend more time with our family, while I have become a respected advocate for children's education and family services throughout our city. Every morning, Julian still brings me coffee in bed with a kiss, just like he did when we were newlyweds discovering each other. Every night, he tells me he loves me, like it's the very first time he's ever said those precious words. "Do you know what the absolute best part of my day is?" Julian asked me this morning as we watched our 3 beautiful children eat breakfast and argue about whose turn it was to feed our goldfish. "Tell me," I said, though after all these years together, I already knew the answer by heart. "Every single moment I get to spend with you," he replied, pulling me into his arms for a kiss that still made my knees weak and my heart race after all these wonderful years. Looking back on our incredible love story, I still marvel at how one accidental collision, one moment of clumsiness, changed absolutely everything about both our lives. From that first electric moment when I stumbled into Julian's strong arms to our wedding day to the births of our 3 precious children. Every chapter has been more beautiful and meaningful than anything I could have imagined. People sometimes ask me what it's really like to be married to a billionaire, but that question misses the point entirely. What matters isn't that I married someone wealthy, what matters is that I married the kindest, most loving, most generous man in the world. A man who saw something special and worthwhile in an ordinary nonprofit worker, and loved me enough to make all my dreams come true while building new dreams together. Just one kiss. Julian still whispers to me sometimes when he holds me close in the quiet moments. That's all it took to change everything forever. The best accident of my entire life, I always whisper back, was letting you catch me when I fell. Our love story proves that sometimes the most incredible, life-changing things happen when you least expect them. Sometimes one moment, one touch, one kiss, one leap of faith can transform your entire world and show you what happiness really means. And I wouldn't change a single moment of our beautiful, chaotic, perfectly imperfect life together.